Spookyou's Frightening Nights of Halloween.
Hello, my dear Franken-friends, and welcome to Spookyou, your one-stop shop for all things ghastly and ghoulish. I'm your host, Barnabas Vixen, and it's night 10 of our Frightening Nights of Halloween series. We're slowly winding to a close with only 3 more nights until Halloween. And I just want to take a second to say how much I appreciate each and every one of you that have supported this channel night in and night out. Yes, even you, Weekly. Even though I'm still limping from our talk a few nights ago. Now, enough of the mushy stuff. You came here for some frights, right? Great, because we have a very special guest for you all tonight. Hailing from the land of the damned, or as the natives like to call it, Australia, the one, the only, Lady Spookaria. You didn't think we'd let her get away with just writing stories, right? We've also got Madam Frightmare, who has been so supportive of this series, and I'm very honored to have her on tonight. As for our authors, we have Lady Spookaria, shocker, and, Sumgigh? Look, I know I butchered that, just throw it up on the screen. I apologize. Reading isn't exactly my forte. And finally, i-may-be-overreacting. Aren't we all, friend? Aren't we all? Anyways, here's I Am a Priestess of the Dead, written and narrated by Lady Spookaria.
I'm a Priestess of the Dead, written and narrated by Lady Spookaria. My family have been Christian for many generations now. If you ask us, we will tell you that is the family religion, and I guess I do the same. What we don't tell people is that we have traditions from long, long ago. These sacred rites are done in private, and I can see why they would be. They're strange. And I guess I shut this side of myself off. It isn't exactly something you go to school to tell your friends about. It is what it is. I suppose there are worse family secrets to have. The body is brought to the family funeral home. Seeing bodies like this doesn't bother me anymore. It is a normal part of life to die. Now, it depends on whether they are part of the extended clans or not. If not, they get a pretty standard funeral, with the most basic of rites, but occasionally, something more is required. Usually people who have passed through terrible situations will require some additional treatment. Rites to ensure that the deceased knows to pass on. We bathe the body while prayers are whispered into the corpse's ears. The liquid has been brewed by the elders, and it is a secret that only the wisest of priests know. I don't know the origin, nor do I truly know what I'm saying when I whisper into their ears. Prayers in a language now lost to time. One that is only spoken for the dead and a few of the living get to hear. The muscles of the deceased are massaged before the body is dressed in clothing, with sacred symbols sewn into it, ancient and ornate patterns of protection of old. Once the body is prepared, it is taken out into the cemetery. This one has long been abandoned, so we're not likely to have people stumble by and find it. There is no coffin. Not yet, anyway. A fresh grave is dug each time before the grave is lined with salt and petals of strange plants. I can always recognize the rich perfume. It isn't unpleasant. Occasionally when I am outside, I will smell it and instantly think of the rites. The deceased is carried out, covered in a white shroud and decorated by a wreath made from local branches, entwined with flowers and hair of the women in the family. I'm still not entirely sure what the tradition associated with that is. Like most of the mentioned rites, the meaning behind them have been lost. And when I asked my grandma about it, she said it was due to a connection with an ancient deity that has not forgotten about us. I have been doing this since I was 13 years old. I wear a white shift and wait while the body is carefully lowered into the ground. My face will be painted with a mixture of ash and blood. Each line has a meaning, an offer of protection, and a talisman to bind us to the soil if the worst should occur. Instead of the traditional body position, the body is cradled into the fetal one instead, surrounded by a pattern of stones, and the final whispers of funerary prayers can be heard chanted around us, songs of protection, of a new life, and a time to move forward. There is no mention of the horror that will come. The priestess will take a mouthful of a liquid that tastes like rust, ash, and I can smell the alcohol. My head instantly begins to spin when I swallow. The scent alone is enough to knock someone out. Over time you build up a tolerance to it or you die. After that, either myself or another priestess is lowered into the grave. This terrified me the first time. Gazing up at people, and I felt like I was already dead. I'm pretty sure that is the point. You're halfway between the living and the dead. I would lay down and squeeze in behind the deceased, wrap my arms around the corpse, and wait in silence while the rest of the family begin to shovel dirt down on top of me. If I show fear, then the rites are unfavorable. And then, well, perhaps I will tell you what happens to a priestess who fails in her duties. While it happens, I tend to let myself drift off somewhere mentally. I imagine running on the beach or wandering through the forest. Anything to touch the living world again. Finally, it goes dark. The grave is relatively shallow and you need to regulate your breathing carefully. It is lonely in the grave, but even more frightening when you realize that you are not alone. The deceased will whimper and sob, the realization that they are dead and they are in their grave, away from everything they cherished and held dear in their hearts. I would hold them tighter, whisper into their ear that they are not alone, and never will be. You need to be fearless in the face of death, because so many are frightened by it. Most of them will quiet down and will sleep in the earth, content in the prayers, and all you have to do is wait until morning. However, there will be some who are restless, and their spirits will summon the unclaimed dead to them. I don't think many of them realize how or why they are doing this. It is usually the ones who have endured much hardship. These ones give you the most trouble. I don't blame them, and I don't hate them. It simply is. Death rites vary from culture to culture, and I don't think it matters what the tradition actually is. The grieving process is important for the families and the deceased. Both need to move forward and accept the passing for a new life. Now, what happens when the deceased calls out to the unclaimed dead? Hands will reach out through the thick soil and try to pull us into the earth with them. If they cannot have peace, neither can you. Muffled screams, and it can be hard to stay focused. The corpse in your arms will start to shudder, whimper and tremble. You'll feel a change. The body will become stronger, harder to hold in place. You will hear the bones crack as the skull begins to turn backwards to face you. It is dark in the grave, but there is no escaping this menace. The lips draw back in a sadistic grin, proof that the deceased is no longer in residence in the body. The foul breath will cause your stomach to turn and twist. You will feel the threat in every part of your being. It is easy to freeze up or try to escape, but you need to stay focused. The prayers need to continue to be whispered. It is vital that it finishes now and the spirits return back. You will know that it works because the head will crack and return to the rightful position. There'll be a final whimper and it goes to rest. Now, what happens if you fail? You will hear more cracking now. The wrists, the elbows, the shoulders. All of them break and the arms turn around, wrap tightly around you, and then it is too late. I don't know what happens after this. I have heard screaming from the grave before, and it haunts my dreams. In the morning, the pair of them will be dug up, and we will see the corpse with the arms tight around her, nearly suffocating her. And it looks up with its glowing eyes at us. The wicked spirit claimed their sacrifice, mocking us for our failure. She didn't beg to be released, and she knew what was going to come. The priestess is buried alive. Her fate is sealed, and the ground is her tomb. The loss is explained somehow. She went missing and is lost to us. Even though her corpse now resides in the ground with the wicked spirit, it means that the spirit is not able to rise up to torment or harm the rest of the living, so it is considered worth it. A casualty of war. One more spirit is trapped beneath the soil. On to happier things. If the rites were successful, she will wait until sunrise in the grave. The priestess is dug up and helped out, reunited with the living, and rejoices at seeing the sun again. The body is removed from the temporary grave, ready now for traditional rites. The priestess will bathe the corpse blood and dirt from her body with scented rainwater, and will not speak to anyone for 3 days or nights. In solitude, a chance for her to rest and regain her strength after the encounter. I tend to sit alone during these times and piece things together. Each time my memory gets worse, and I think it has to do with the drink we are offered at the start of each ritual. There are always several priestesses within each clan, each of us alternating between caring for the dead, cleaning the bodies, making our mixtures and teaching. I received a message earlier today, so I guess there will be a body to care for. I can't say that I enjoy it, but I've gotten used to it. Only once I have heard the bones snap and crack beneath the ground. I recognize some of the voices when they whisper to me. Every single time they got closer, and they have become more demanding.
This is the third time we're ragging on Lady Spookaria in this series, and unfortunately, it's our last. But there is a silver lining. For having 3 stories featured so closely together, it seems she's won our gold medal. However, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and gold is hard to come by, so we opted for a lifetime supply of nuggies instead. Congratulations, Lady Spookaria. Please contact our office within the next 3 seconds to claim your prize or have it forfeited to the mysterious powers that be. Oh, too late. Sorry, lady. Better luck next year. Seriously though, we're happy to have featured Lady's work on so many nights here in this series. One last time for the road. Check out her channel for live streams, the Harper Codex, original stories, and more. And be sure to keep up with everything she's doing over on Twitter at Lady Spookaria. Thanks so much, Lady, for not only lending your writing, but your voice to our Frightening Nights series. Next up is full-size candy bars written by Sumgigh and narrated by Madame Frightmare.
There's a point in your life when things that have happened to you just become stories. I don't mean that they are any less important or that they didn't happen, but they just turned into a thing that happened once. No matter how much it affected you, it's just a story. Even if you're the one who survived. 5 years ago, when we were 15, my best friend Andy and I decided to go trick-or-treating one more time. I know we were probably too old, and the adults in the neighborhood would just roll their eyes when we showed up. But we figured they would give up the candy because kids our age are more likely to mess with their house if they didn't get free chocolate. Andy and I weren't like that at all, but it didn't make us any less likely to embrace the idea. Free candy is free candy. Being of that age when lazy becomes an art form in and of itself, Andy and I weren't just going to go out only to find what we were getting crappy stuff like butterscotch candies, or the sort of stuff you see in Grandma's candy dish. Leave that for what our parents did. This is the digital age. If you know what to look for, and even with basic social media skills, you can actually get your route mapped out for you in advance. Even 4 years ago, kids were all over Twitter posting pics and putting up hashtags where really good candy was. We looked for hashtag full size. When it sounded like a good idea at the time, it also led to more than a few pictures of dudes naked below the waist. It wasn't a foolproof way to find candy, but it worked at least a little bit. We were able to find a neighborhood not too far from Andy's house that had 4 different stops with full-size candy bars. We each had 3 different masks, you know, the cheap thin plastic kind that got held onto your head by an even cheaper and thinner piece of elastic, or a rubber band. They were only $1 a piece at the local dollar store, and we got more than that back in chocolate from just those few houses. Sure, by the 3rd time the parents got a clue, but what difference did it make? By the time we actually went out, only about an hour had passed until most of the houses were turning off their lights and blowing out the candles in their pumpkins. We went out a bit later than the other kids, because we were older, and of course we meant that we couldn't be out at the same time as the little kids. Andy was scrolling through Twitter trying to see if there were any other houses close by that we could hit up, and wasn't having much luck. I was looking through what had turned out to be a pretty epic haul when he nudged me with his elbow and held out his phone for me to see. "Hey, there's one more," he said, his voice muffled behind his white skeleton mask. I looked at the screen and saw a picture of 3 full-size Snickers bars on a picture with the hashtag full-size. Andy scrolled his thumb across the screen and showed the address. It was about 2 miles away, which, where we lived, meant it was out in the middle of nowhere, near the edge of the woods. "Dude," I said, "that's way out there. We won't get there before they go to bed." Andy shook his head. "Nah, check it out." He kept scrolling his thumb to all the people who had replied to the picture. No one was going out there, everyone saying it was too far away, or too creepy, or whatever. If they went through the trouble of getting full-size candy bars and barely anyone showed up, they are for sure gonna wait up. I bet it's just some lonely geezers who just want people to remember they're alive. I hesitated. I really didn't want to go that far out. It was cold, and I watched as thick clouds of breath came out from behind Andy's mask. 2 miles? I asked. None of which meant anything to me until he pointed out that if no one was going out there, then they probably would just give us a bunch of candy without needing to do a mask routine. Finally, I agreed. If nothing else, it would make for a good story. We could make it sound even better. Maybe even live tweet it and see if people could make it go viral. How we could make it seem like we were in the middle of a scary movie. Going up to the house, hashtag creepy. There's some weird music playing inside. Hashtag WTF. WTF? Even if they were asleep, we could take some pics or something and make it seem like a big deal. What else were we going to do? Except that we forgot most of that by the time we got there. The house was even further back in the woods than I thought. The start of the driveway seemed about a half a mile from the road to the house, and there was a slight bend in it so you really couldn't see the house beyond a light that was in one of the windows. We didn't stop at the road or anything that dramatic. We had been walking that far, and I think that as much as we had excited ourselves at the idea of a Twitter thing, We were also tired and just wanted to get the candy and go home and watch scary movies. As long as the driveway was, it felt like a fast walk. I didn't take my eyes off the door from the moment we could see it. There was just one light on in the house. I think it was the garage light, and it had shone in the side window, so I couldn't actually see anything inside. There was a carved pumpkin with a flickering flame on the stoop, but it was really poorly done, like a little kid or some old person with palsy tried to make it. And there was a lock on the door. I don't mean like a deadlock, but one of those little 5-button things you see attached to the doors of houses that are for sale. See, old people. They keep that on there in case they lock themselves out or something, Andy said in a tone that didn't sound at all that sure. It sounded good enough to me as an arm reached out to press the doorbell. The sound of the ding-dong had barely stopped when the door cracked open. Andy and I stood there. Not a single word passed between us as we stared at what we could only assume was a man in a doorway. He was about average height, a little overweight, but he was wearing a weird mask. It had squinted eyes and really fat cheeks with a puckered mouth like he was trying to hold in his breath. Behind the man was a single exposed red light bulb that backlit him. He just stood there, wheezing with each breath behind the mask as it slowly turned back and forth looking at each of us. I'm not sure which of us spoke first, but eventually we each remembered to say trick or treat. The man stood there for at least another minute looking back and forth between Andy's skull mask and my fox mask before turning around and walking deeper into the house. Andy and I looked at each other. Even though I couldn't see his eyes, I imagined they had the same confused, terrified look as mine. When he looked back, I could see the man pick up a box of candy bars. As he slowly turned back to the door, his arm hit a railing, and he grunted as the box flew out of his hands, and the candy bars spilled all over the ground. A few actually slid within a foot of the door. The man grunted and cursed as he bent over to pick them up. Andy and I didn't move from where we were on the front steps until the man turned around. He was on his hands and knees picking up the candy bars, and Andy nudged me, pointing at the candy that was just inside the door. I think I shook my head, but I can't remember. A moment of panic overtaking me. I just wanted to leave, so I reached inside the door and grabbed the candy. The man's back was still turned, and I knew I could just grab the bar and we could take off running, splitting up if we had to. Why would he chase us? I had no idea. We were pretty worked up by that point. It all happened in a matter of seconds as my hand touched the smooth, cool wrapper of the candy bar, and I felt a vice grip clamp down on my wrist so hard I thought it was going to break. The man had spun in place and grabbed me. He had been way closer than I had realized. Something about the light and my mask messed with how well I had seen him. In one smooth motion, he tugged on my arm and I went flying into the door. But as soon as he pulled me past him, my body falling to the ground like a lump, he lunged at Andy. Something flashed in his hands. Andy had turned to run and suddenly crumpled to the ground. The man stood over him, still breathing insanely loud and his breath a cloud in front of him. I was trying to get up as he turned and saw what was in his hand, a taser. That's the last thing I remember before waking up again outside of the house. My body ached and my head was killing me. My face was cold too. I realized I wasn't wearing my mask. I looked around desperately for Andy, but I was all alone. The front door to the house was closed. The pumpkin was gone off the front steps. The lights were off. I scrambled to grab my phone, but that was gone too. I was just about to start running when the panic shifted in me, and I realized that Andy might still be in the house. Yeah, he could have run away, but what if he didn't? As quietly as I could, I went around the house, trying to look into the darkened windows, but I couldn't see anything. I was too scared to knock on the door. I mean, it wasn't a prank. The son of a bitch used a taser on Andy. When I had almost done a complete lap, I thought I saw something moving in the dark. I cupped my eyes to the window and almost passed out as a fat, round mask burst toward the window, thumping its forehead against the glass. I let out a scream, and it just stayed there, staring at me. Then it looked down at its side, next to him, and I watched as something white lifted into view. It was a skeleton mask. Andy's skeleton mask. And there was something splattered on it. Something red. I ran until my legs gave out, and I tumbled against the first house I found that had lights on. I was gasping and crying and begging them to call the police. By the time the police got out to the house, there was nothing there. No man, no Andy. All they found was a splintered door frame from where the back door had been kicked in. I hadn't even noticed that in the dark. If I had, maybe I could have done something instead of running away like a coward. I later learned that the lock on the door was because the house had been foreclosed on a week prior. The Twitter account that Andy and I had found was a week old as well. If we had bothered to look, we would have seen that the account followed over 1,000 people and a haul of 15 followers. All the tweets were retweets from other legit accounts except for the picture of the candy bars. It was registered in the name of a kid who went to a nearby middle school, but that was just a lie to throw people off. To lure someone in. And it had worked. I cried a lot. I cried as I told the strangers whose house I had ran to what happened, begging them to call the cops. I cried when I told the cops and my parents what happened. I cried as I tried to understand why any of it had happened. Why he let me go. Why he only took Andy. It's been 5 years since Andy disappeared and there's been nothing. No response. Every year I sit on Twitter and I look up the hashtag full size, checking everything out, making sure it isn't a lie or a lure. I've called the police more than a few times thinking I found the guy. But mostly I'm just looking for my friend. So I can stop telling this story and start living my life again. The life I lost the day that Andy disappeared. For a full-size candy bar.
Now, let's throw it on over to Madame Frightmare to learn a bit about her channel.
Hi, I'm Madame Frightmare. Thank you for checking out this video, as well as thanks to Spookyou for having me. I am a horror/spooky story narrator, as well as an aspiring writer. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and of course, YouTube. If you haven't already checked me out, the link to all of my social media will be down below. Hope to see you soon.
I'd love to tell you a bit more about this author, but I couldn't find much from them. This story came from the Creepypasta Wiki, but it seems that this is the only story they've written. Either that, or I'm not very good at navigating said wiki, which is entirely possible. Regardless, please be sure to head on over to their profile and check them out. And our final story of the night is A Good Movie and a Cold Beer, written by i-may-be-overreacting and narrated by our vivacious voiceover virtuoso. See, most people wouldn't even find my evening worrisome, or even abnormal. All I'm doing is sitting here on my couch. In fact, it's downright cozy here. My dog and my cat are both snuggled up on top of me, nuzzled into our fluffy blanket. The windows are all open and the cool fall breeze is streaming through, laced with the smell of the ocean nearby. There's also something metallic, but I can't place it. Maybe one of the industrial buildings nearby. Truth be told, I'm a bit high. I couldn't help myself. It just seems like the perfect night to be doing exactly this. My favorite movie, Moana if you must know, is playing on Disney Plus and I have everything I could possibly need nearby. Cold beer, glass of water, more weed nearby. So why do I feel so terrified? Like there's someone nearby, lurking. Like something is wrong. Dread is gripping my chest. At first, I thought it was the paranoia from the weed, but no. This is deeper. There's black smoke in my lungs, and the outer rings of my vision are shimmering. And the the hallucinations, I can't even explain it. This new strain of weed I bought from the guy on the beach last night must be laced with something. It must be, because my wife and our 2 sons are on the floor, laid carefully around the couch at my feet. The butchering that befell them is the stuff of horror movies. I mean, there's limbs missing, there's parts gone. The image of blood in that blurry peripheral vision is almost as dark as what I see right in front of me. I wonder how my brain learned that no matter how much blood there is in a person, you don't realize how much more there actually is in there. Yes, these hallucinations, they're terrible. But the fact that they're auditory and I can feel them, all I hear is laughing, and it sounds like it's coming from me, and the blood, it even feels like blood. This is crazy, man. But hey, at least I can finish my movie. Now, let's learn a little bit about our final author of the night. You can find i-may-be-overreacting on Reddit, and they have a couple of stories for you to read. They're mostly 2-sentence horror stories, but those can make for some disturbing reads. Be sure to head on over to their profile and give them a follow. And that's gonna wrap things up for us tonight, my darling deviants. Thank you so much to the narrators and authors that lent their talents to this video, and be sure you devour the links in the description to check out each and every one of them. This wouldn't be possible without all of their hard work. Now tomorrow we'll be back again at the same time with more narrators and authors to satiate that horrific appetite of yours. Smash that thumbs up, annihilate that subscribe button, and ring that little bell while you're at it. Until next time, my ghastly gang, stay spooky.